you owe me. Bitch, better have my money. Pay me what?
Okay, are you full of spirit?
That's
where it ends.
Spiritual.
I still love this song. Huh?
No,
If Ugo's youth, then I'm infant. Can we just agree that? Folu Storms. If Ugo is youth, I'm infant.
Please, I'm just here to work. I don't know I've been involved in these things.
this is bullying. Bullying. Youths always get bullied.
Okay.
Part is what she says. Mr. Osho free.
So free, yeah. I still love this song.
Mr. Osho free.
What's the name again? Lamidino.
No, Aramide.
Aramide. What's so free? It's old, but it's one of my favorite Niger tracks.
I never seen that
What's so
song.
free? Every time I hear it, it always makes me up like.
Yeah, it's a good song.
Yeah.
All right, we're in studio. Mics are up. Good morning once more. You are listening to Smooth 98.1. Welcome to Smooth Breakfast with Valentine and myself, Folu. And as it is 7:30 right now, it's time to jump into detailed newspaper analysis inside of Freshly Pressed. To help us with our analyses this morning, we've got our fantastic team of analysts. We've got Funmi Odude in the studio. Good morning, Funmi. How are you?
Good morning, Folu. Welcome back.
Thank
Nice to
you.
see you again.
Great to see you too. We have Miss Ireti, Bakare, Yusuf in studio as well. Good morning, Miss Ireti.
Youth.
Yes, the
Good
youth.
morning, Lagos.
Keyword.
The youth are here. The youth are here. We have Ugo Dre of Nairametrics in the studio with us as well. Good morning, Ugo Dre.
Who is not a youth?
Good morning, Lagos. Good to be here again.
Infant.
We haven't seen you in a while.
Lagos, find them all on Twitter discussing youth or no youth. Their Twitter handles at Ugo Dre, at Gay Lagos, and at Funmi Odude. That's how you can find their handles. We are streaming live on YouTube right now. So if you go to youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos, you'll be able to watch the live stream and see our faces in here. We're waving to you. And of course, you can comment up there as well.
Yes, our first story will go straight in from the Vanguard newspaper. But first, you need to join us on YouTube, just youtube.com/smooth91FM Lagos. You can send messages on WhatsApp. The number is 0809 444-0981. That's 0809 444 981. The first story talks about the Senate stolen mace. Yesterday, it went agog in the red chambers of the Senate. Now, at the time this happened, President was in the UK addressing the Commonwealth and making statements that were addressed later. And then the Senate President, Bukola Saraki, is away in DC, Washington, DC. So it so happens that the Deputy Senate President, Ike Kwemado, was in the House, presiding over what happened. But after the mace was stolen, the Nigerian police swooped in. I said they did some reconnaissance, mission, cordoned the city off, and finally found the mace. Yeah,
there was pressure. They put pressure on people. It had to be abandoned.
Finally discovered the stolen mace.
Intelligence, they said.
Intelligent. No, there's so
The one they
many
didn't have the day
descriptions.
before.
They called the SWAT team too.
Oh wow! Yeah, they did. We're being sarcastic, but it's a serious situation that happened. But they recovered the stolen mace, which is a symbol of authority on the house, at the flyover before the Abuja City Gate, according to the ASP Aremu Adeniro. Miss Ireti.
Yes, it's pretty scary when you look at the video. We're all looking at the videos downstairs, and when I saw it yesterday, the first thing that came to mind is, you mean seriously people can just barge into the house and without so much as So clearly they don't do any checks. The security has obviously been very, very non-existent. Actually, we can't say it was lapse. It clearly wasn't existing. Hoodlums, and you could see the shock. In fact, what gets you is, I'm sorry, I've got to say this, is the jelly-bellied of our senators, because the minute they heard the noise from, you know, all the that was happening, it's like some started running the other way without even seeing. And this is the difference between, you know, the black man and the white man. When you're supposed to run to where the noise is and like, what's going on? We need to try and sort it. The black man would just like, now you on your own, meet me at home kind of thing. And that's why, but the shock was evident. And I think even for us, the shock was evident in all of our faces, that somebody could just barge into the house, a group of hoodlums, as they rightly said. Now, what is interesting with this story that's in Vanguard is Ekuremadu doesn't mention Omo Agege. However, stories in the reports, in other reports, they mention it is implied. And we have to say alleged.
And the video shows him coming in with the hoodlums behind him.
Well, there you go. So, and he's basically denying that it had anything to do with him. Now, clearly, with all this intelligence, which they didn't have on Tuesday, which they suddenly had on Wednesday, that intelligence clearly didn't tell them that, Omo Agege is not happy. You've basically suspended him. And he's going to be coming in number one. The intelligence didn't say to them, at some point, we've actually got terrorism going on in the country. We have the equivalent of clutches of war like situations going on, and you didn't think, okay, we need to put security barriers up, we need to be checking. Nothing.
Mr. Ireti, that's what seems so suspicious about the way all of this has happened, because this is a place that to enter you have to feel like forming triplicates. They'll ask you 1,000 questions. So clearly there was some
through security checks and everything.
You know what? How did he even go out with the mace in the first place?
Yes,
I mean, like,
and
okay, let's even agree. Okay, you found your way in, but how did you escape?
Yes,
the
it went
mace?
into.
I mean, to me, it looks staged though. Like
it does look staged.
The way he carried it, the way it was carried.
He carried it.
I mean, it could have been the Nigerian version of Superman.
He said, "Come and beat me."
Yes, come on, you dare. And they all basically scarpered to the left and right, and like, you know, and it really scary because I have a very close friend of mine who works there, and the minute I texted her was like, "Baby, are you okay? Are you okay, darling?" And she's like, "Yes," because I just thought they really could have shot them. Let's be frank with each other. It was so. What's
brazen?
Yes.
It was
brazen, so brazen and so porous. You know. So we'll see what happens. Well, the mace has been returned. That's the good news. Because without actually, what is important is without that mace being there, you could actually take the mace to another place and use it against
because it's government. Authority. Without it being there, the Senate President cannot sit. So,
that's right.
We'll move on to the next story on ThisDay newspaper. Federal government makes U-turn to adopt ranching to end herders-farmers clashes. Now, the federal government yesterday backtracked on its plan to establish the cattle colonies, saying it would now focus on the establishment of ranches as a solution to the long-drawn clashes between herdsmen and farmers. Now, Funmi, when you look at the story, do you think this will bring an end to the squabble and to the whole impasse surrounding ranching and herdsmen attacks and everything that's been going on?
You know, I think sometime last year, people, in fact, I have argued that it was basically a lazy solution because it felt like you're finally giving in to what they want, and it's not the business of the government to create adequate facilities for your business, in the sense of farmers don't wake up and say you must give us farms, dedicate farms to us. But a part of me looks at the fact that when you consider the amount of lives and properties that has been lost over the situation, any solution that is brought almost feels like, let's try it. At least let's stop the destruction of lives and properties. But again, the question is, will it actually do that? Because a part of the story, we've heard so many times that earthmen are nomadic in nature, and they themselves at several times have rejected the idea of ranching, saying their nature is nomadic. Is it going to be a short-term solution or a long-term solution? I also fear that what could have started out as the problem that stemmed from lack of dwindling resources could have been hijacked by now terrorists, frankly. And so the solution that we ought to have brought earlier that would probably have solved it might not do so anymore, because nefarious characters have now used this particular problem to create a security challenge. So I'm not completely sure That it's something we could implement as a short-term solution, but as a long-term solution, I think we need to go back to security.
But bringing on the angle of some funny characters actually taking advantage of this situation to use it for man trouble, this move could sieve the wheat from the chaff. Make sure first when it addresses this situation, and then the herders and the farmers now see eye to eye, we now are able to differentiate from the real herders and the terrorists themselves.
Yes, the differentiation will only help us if our security agencies are adequate enough to deal with the distinction, with the distinction, and with the terrorists. Yeah. I mean, the problem we've had in Nigeria is not identifying the terrorists. The problem we've had is in tackling them. So our security agencies, this solution, bring it on, but it cannot completely work until we deal with empowering our security agencies to actually be able to face the various security challenges that we have.
All right, thank you very much for me. Next story is from The Punch. Health workers begin strike. Action paralyzes hospitals. They sent out this threat yesterday, and now it has happened. So Johetsu, that's a combination of 5 registered unions in health sector. That's members of the joint health sector unions in Nigeria. On Wednesday, commenced an indefinite strike to press on their demands. The demands being, being that the federal government, they had an agreement with the federal government dating as far back as 2009 and 2012, and as of today, they still haven't met it. So, at the University College Hospital in Ibadan, the union staged protest around the facility, accusing the federal government of disobeying court orders. Ms. Ireti, when we look at this story, is this going to bring us? Is this a means to an end, or are strikes the way to go now?
Well, look, we keep saying that, but the government is always letting down, groups of professionals, and in particular the professionals who serve the government, who work within the government services, because this clearly isn't affecting any private hospitals, it's only affecting government hospitals. Just like they let down the teachers, the education system, they're letting down the health workers and the health system. What else do you expect them to do? They have to go on strike. I think you will find that often this group of professionals, they are the last to actually want to go on strike because of the oath of office that they take, etc., to save lives, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, they also have families, and they have to feed their families. And it's not your doctor ID that's going to send your child to school, or that's going to give you money from one of those horrible banks that we all have to deal with, or whatever. It's at the end of the day, you've got to be able to pay. And you dehumanize people when you don't pay them for the work that they do. It's just totally dehumanizing. So I totally agree with their strike. However, as per usual, who suffers? The ordinary people. So lots of people are literally having to carry their sick people out of the hospitals and take them to private hospitals because they weren't going to be seen to. But they do say that the very serious ones will be left. That they will be left. It's the not so serious ones that they won't deal with. I don't know how far that is. The other thing also is that we have backup, what do you call them? Like you have in the UK, you have agency workers, agency nurses and stuff that you bring in during situations like that, like this. I don't think we have that because if
they tend to go to NYSC students at this point. No, but that is what happens because unfortunately we keep coming back to this exact same situation over and over again, and they do find ancillary workers, but it is problematic.
It is problematic, and I think yet again it is the fault of the government. It's nobody else's fault. It's not the fault of the unions. It's not the fault of the doctors or the nurses or whatever. It is the fault of the government. Government consistently, insistently lets us down in this country.
Because if you look at what they're asking for a review, upward review of the retirement age, they're asking for increased funding for hospitals and procurement of medical equipment. That the same things that the government is crying about, saying that is what Nigeria is lacking.
Forgive me for interrupting you. Yet one governor builds the equivalent of a Dubai hospital that's become not so much a white elephant, a pink elephant that can't even take off, and it's now rotted in what's the name of that government that built it in somewhere in the east? Akwa Ibom. Thank you. Rather than invest. I mean,
let's go over to a few of the comments that are coming through. Samuel from Lekki up on WhatsApp says, the thing that pained me was that the only time that my former governor, T.A. Oji, wanted to make contribution at the Senate since 2015, he was now interrupted by Cobb. Who knows what he wanted to say?
That's so easy.
Samuel continues. He says,
Thank
funny
you for
enough.
that joke.
He says, funny enough, the police came after thugs drove away with the mace, whereas the Senate planned to shut down National Assembly to help Buhari fight insecurity.
Exactly.
Yet they watched as the mace was taken. While Vincent Mecca from Adeba says, mace in the House of Senate removed. How did we get to this point as a nation? This is really embarrassing. Vincent, I think embarrassing was when 2014, 2015, all the previous years, they keep fighting and kung fuing each other. So I thought they would have kung fued the thugs to the ground, but apparently not. More coming through. Bengus says, I had known that the lawlessness and impunity of the Saraki-led Senate leadership wouldn't last long. A situation where any senator who has a contrary opinion from that of the leadership of the Senate is being suspended for months, thereby depriving his constituents due representation, should be highly condemned. Even when the courts have before now ruled against the lawlessness of the Senate, suspending its members. In the case of Aliun Dume, this impunity still continues. Saraki will find it very difficult to cow the Senate, and what happened yesterday was a case of lawlessness versus lawlessness. Perhaps he has a point. While we've got this in from, let's see, Prince, who says the House of Reps has withdrawn the election reordering bill. Let's see what the Senate will do. The bill will die a natural death.
Very quickly, we'll go to The Guardian for this story. Buhari convokes summit on herders attacks. President Muhammad Buhari will next week is planned to convene a regional conference on the economic community of West African states in Abuja to come up with a framework to stop the killings perpetrated by suspected herdsmen. Now, since there's been widespread reports that some of these people are foreigners, people are perpetrating these attacks, it would influence the decision to involve most of these other countries, or rather, countries in this West African region. For me,
this is a long time coming, and you know when we spoke about separating the wheat from the chaff.
From the chaff, yeah.
Yes, this is part of it. So the president has said a number of times that part of the people perpetrating the attacks are foreigners. And when you consider the fact that we have an ECOWAS protocol on free movement of persons, goods, and services, we need to go back to those our surrounding countries and have a discussion on how to ensure that in enforcing this protocol, we also sort of protect ourselves and our borders. So yeah, this is very important. It's a long time coming. I'm surprised it took us this while to get there, but you know what they say, never better late than never.
Yeah.
So yes, I only hope that, unlike a lot of summits that we have that are just people giving papers and
passing a communique
at the end, these are actual discussions that bring practical solutions that would actually do something about the situation.
Thank you very much for that.
Tighten up the borders, tighten up the borders. That's what we keep saying. Up next, we are still talking about the president, not in the most flattering light. Ugo Dre, the youth of the nation at the moment. The new Telegraph says the National Association of Nigerian Students, that's NANS, say that Nigerian youth are not lazy but have been failed by their leaders. Now they differ with President Muhammad Buhari, who recently made a rather unfortunate comment generalizing and calling the youth of this country lazy. NANS actually did go on in this article to explain very clearly. They're like, well, we were not the beneficiaries of free education. We were not the beneficiaries of guaranteed jobs after you stepped out of school. We're dealing with a number of issues, and yet we, the youth, were the ones who managed to get you into power. Let's see in 2019 who is lazy and who is not. Ugo Dre, please.
Yes, so
on behalf of the youth.
I don't know why these ladies are laughing. Ugo Dre, please don't let them disturb your shine. Please.
They just want to take me out of.
Don't mind them.
Where I belong.
Don't mind them.
First of all, let me start with some numbers, right? And it's usually better to address things like this succinctly. Initially, when I read this, I said, oh, this is just one of those Buhari's of remarks. We all know he has that weakness. But you know what? I read it and I'm like, look, this is actually a disgrace. So let's just call it what it is, right? It's a disgrace coming from a leader. President Buhari, unemployment and underemployment rate today for the youth is 52.6%. 52.6% underemployment and unemployment rate. So there are about 22.6 million Nigerians who are youth without jobs. And according to the National Bureau of Statistics, youths are like between the ages of 15 and 35. So these are the stronghold of your economy, and they don't have jobs. And that same bureau says young people are more likely to find it difficult to secure full employment. So what do you want these guys to do? Now, you call these guys lazy. Now, these are the same people who graduated from school trying to get a job. They can't get a job. Even when they get a job, they probably don't get paid well. And guess what? A lot of them are emigrating to Canada to countries where they actually find them more useful,
Yep.
right? And you say these guys are lazy.
But do you think he was misquoted in some sense?
No.
Like he didn't express himself
He
well
said it.
enough, or
You know what really gets me about the statement is the statement that we expect free education, healthcare, and I'm like,
But you
of
were
course,
like,
that's the fact that a leader thinks we shouldn't expect that. So that means he does not even put that as an objective for himself. Like, let's get to the point where government actually provides free education, free healthcare. How can you not expect
and
us to
that,
But
that's
Valentine makes
what
a
they
good
enjoy in
point,
their
though.
time.
Valentine makes a good point, and those of you who want to text me, feel free to keep your fingers by the button ready. Buhari is not a communicator.
He's
I don't
out of
believe.
touch.
I don't believe he was.
He's out
I
of
don't.
touch.
I don't believe he was misquoted. I think what he is that the man was never furnished nor flourished with language. So in effect, he shouldn't be allowed to speak off the cuff.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Ireti. I 100% agree there. He just really shouldn't. And we wish we had a president who perhaps was a little bit more witty. And Obama would be nice at this point.
Hashtag Trump. Trump. Feel sorry for the Americans.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's
Very
true.
good.
Buffalo, he's out of touch. Bro.
He is out of
He's
touch.
out of touch.
But we
It
do
depends on
have
what
to
you
move
call
on.
touch, but we can't discuss
I
it.
know we do need to move on. But Lagos, please continue to send in those messages. We'll get to them in just a second. Up next, Funmi, I'm going to come to your story. Let's talk about the persistent Apapa gridlock. Stakeholders are blaming the Nigerian Ports Authority as well as the DPE. And someone asked, perhaps this is rightfully so. When we look into the details of the story, we have the chairman of Association of Maritime Truck Owners, Mr. Remy Ogungwemi, who said that the problem of truck congesting the port gate started during the era of port reforms. They say that there used to be holding capacity for about 2,000, 3,000 trucks made available until all the concessionaires sort of moved in, things started moving around, and says that the NPA are solely to blame for all of this, that they could have resolved the situation a long time ago. They could enforce or ensure that people stick within the rules and regulations. Even the most recent suggestion where they said all shipping companies should empty their trucks at their holding base outside of the port location pending the time for vessel loading. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so we did the story sometime last week, and there were a whole lot of blame. But this time around, it looks like we're now solely concentrating on the NPA. And yes, like you already said, the chairman of the Association of Maritime Truck Owners has narrowed down his own problem, which is that the problem is because, of course, we know it's because they don't have where to park.
Yeah.
And then he goes back to before the concession where he says we didn't have this problem because there was enough space within the ports for the trucks to park. But now that we don't have space for them to park, that's what's causing the problem. Nubank, on the other hand, still blaming the NPA though. Its problem is twofold. Number one, let's ensure maximum use of our other ports in Warri, Calabar, Onne, and Port Harcourt. They've always maintained that for a very long time.
Yes.
And then the second problem they have, and they have persistently actually said this as well, the holding bays for containers. And the NPA had issued a directive some while ago, and it refused to ensure enforcement of this directive. And so we have companies flouting the directive, asking them to ensure that their containers are in holding bays. I think so. In the story last week, we got the report that NBA said it was not a directive, it was merely an
We're just telling them. So we don't want to use our harsh voice.
Yeah, so maybe it should move from the level of advice to actually a directive at this point.
For me, here's a question for you. As you say, move from the level of advice to a directive. I find it interesting that in a number of situations where whether government authorities or agencies could hold private individuals or private companies responsible for some of their actions, they don't. Do you think this is because of a fear of affecting maybe the flow of income from these private companies?
Chase them away. But you know, the truth of the matter is, if the companies are making money here, and they do make money here, they're not going to go away. If we just tried it, yes, you're right. There's always this fear of, oh, let's not make things too difficult for them. But I don't see a company that is making millions of naira moving away just because
we're enforcing regulations
that their containers are in. And by the time, after a while, they get to see themselves that it actually helps them, because
absolutely. Make this
They
your
get their
CSR.
goods a lot easier.
And unfortunately, if you allow them this much, they'll probably, want to take advantage of more.
They have been
Yes,
taking advantage.
That is why we still have gas flaring.
Oh, gas flaring! You've not seen all the rubbish on the roads. You've not seen all the pet plastic bottles
The suit and
that we should be holding private companies responsible for. But let's move away from that now. Let's not shake that table. Lagos. Moving on to our next story. Let's talk about the court halting the sale of 9 Mobile and shareholders led by Mangal demanding 43.3 million US dollars worth of a refund. Now, Ugo Dre, I find this particularly amusing. First of all, Justice Binta Nyako of the Federal High Court has become somewhat of a celebrity judge. I feel like she's in a lot of our news stories at the moment. But aggrieved shareholders are saying that they put in a certain amount of money, and now that Teleology, who is the prime bidder, who's already paid a $50 million non-refundable deposit for 9 Mobile and has been given 90 days to pay the balance of 450 million, it seems rather opportune for shareholders to come in right now. Ugo Dre, why wasn't this action taken beforehand, and what's your breakdown of the story?
Well, if you followed deals like this in the past, it's typically a route that minority shareholders like to follow when they want to try to wrestle a little bit equity for themselves when things like this happen. So they are usually in minority rights. But clearly, the fact that 9 Mobile is nearly going bankrupt and essentially owned by the banks, you would think that shareholders shareholders' funds are not eroded completely. So when that happens, it means they actually don't own anything again. But then I don't know whether the due process was followed. And if I know Alhaji Mangal very well, he's some guy who knows how to use court orders or take it to
because, like I
or
said,
regulations and then bring it back to the table. He's
this
done
is
it
a
with
pressure
Wando.
decision
So
move.
if you remember the Wando case last year, he was the one in the midst of all that. And at the end of the day, a few months later, they've sat down with the Wando and they issued a press release and they've agreed. Right, so that's probably what this might end up with.
I mean, but I look at things saying that they're conducting a clandestine sale of the company. I mean, clandestine?
You're trying to force
Clandestine is not
but you're trying to force someone to the table now. So you have to just, come out with all the razzmatazz and just make it look like, oh, I've been killed, I've been there, and the court has to hear you.
It's hardly condensed.
Yeah, so of course you're not.
Thank you. I just thought I would ask. Let me know what the meaning of that word is. Let's move on next to slightly more sobering news. We'll talk about the Offa robbery. Actually, the retired SARS boss who shot himself recently in Ogun State. Mr. Ireti, I'm coming to you for this one. They say there were no indications that a former chief superintendent of police, David Agolo, was depressed. There seemed to be no history of that, but he did kill himself very recently after handing over the keys to their houses to his daughter. He killed himself, shot himself in the head in his living room, and it's rather worrying. Now, a source had said that he'd received strange phone calls 2 days before the incident and had been acting a little strange, but kept saying nothing was wrong. But Mr. Ireti, quite often we do seem to miss the signs of perhaps depression, the signs of a deeper seated issue. But what is your take on this story?
Well, it's not often that you get somebody who is suffering, because we must be clear, there's a difference to having a bad week, a bad month, a bad year, to suffering depression.
Yes.
People tend to use it as, I'm depressed. Actually, the minute you say you're depressed, you're really clearly not that depressed. Do you understand? So, and this is it because it has to be clinically diagnosed. Now, of course, you're right, Folu, we do miss the signs all the time. So everybody's claiming that this gentleman or this retired policeman wasn't depressed. They don't know. We actually can't claim to know. But one thing they did say is that he received telephone calls a couple of days before and started to behave strangely. Now, also, the story contradicts. I think at the first part, they tell you that he shot himself. He went to the back and shot himself.
Yes, and then
the
it
second
says
part,
in
it says
his
he shot
living
himself
room.
in the living room. Now they can't even decide where he shot himself. What we do know is that he shot himself. Now, it's interesting, and I hope they're not just giving us some, I don't know, rhetoric that they're supposed to say. Tell them we're doing investigation, because it would be good if they do properly investigate and find out what led to this. We need to know these things and collate this evidence, not just because one person is dead is to prevent other people from dying in the same way, and to start to actually look at the trends that's happening and the ills that's affecting our community, our social landscape as a whole. We need to start. That's why you must constantly do investigation and collect the data. But I dare say what they've said in here, they won't be investigating. These are the same policemen who don't investigate robberies. So
it's really sad stuff. For time reasons, we do have to move on very quickly. Our final story: Ugo Dre, Offa robbery. The police have arraigned the hotel owner, workers, and guests of this particular hotel. They're saying because they could not give satisfactory accounts of questionable lodgers in the hotel prior to the robbery. And their failure to maintain or keep official lodger registered. I mean, over to you, Ugo Dre.
Folu, this is personally, I think this is a lesson for small hotel owners. That register that you keep, that you have, lodgers putting their phone number on your names, you got to take it seriously, and you take it seriously for things like this. You never know who's lodging your hotel. You don't know who they are. You don't know where they're from. You don't know what they're there for. So you should be able to keep registers, phone numbers. You should even have CCTV in those hotels as well, because these are things that they can use for evidence, or they can use for anything,
or cross-referencing,
and all that. So it's sad that I want to believe that there was a bit of naivety somewhere in here. Maybe they were a little bit scared, and now police have arrested them. I feel like maybe they might let them go. They're currently on bail.
Because the
fear is if I lodge in a hotel.
Yes, because I was going to say, one, I understand that for people who do have some responsibility. So workers in the hotel, the hotel owners. If you're a guest in the hotel now, you've been swept up in this net as well. Because you cannot give a satisfactory account of what precisely.
Yeah, but that's how it is anywhere in the world. So if you're in a hotel, if you have nothing to hide, right, and you're called, just tell them what you're doing there. I mean, like, I have business around here, or I feel like taking a rest, and then they can trace your steps a day or two.
But can they trace it here? Fine. Which is the problem? Because we have a lot of
like
people languishing in prisons.
Police want to work, they can work. Even though I never knew what that means.
But we also have a lot of people languishing in.
I don't know what that means. They always say,
police want
to work.
We also have a lot of people languishing in jails that did try to explain what they were doing and are there for no good reason.
That's true as well. But in this particular case, though, the fact that you had robbery suspects in a hotel, and they've been, to an extent, confirmed that they were there, you expect the hotel owners or the hotel operators to actually cooperate with police fully. That's why they say that you cooperate fully with police. They don't say cooperate in part. You got to cooperate fully and absolve yourself of issues like this.
On that note, we are done. I wish we could do more on Freshly Pressed, but thank you to our analysts for this morning's breakdown of the news stories. I'll read out a couple of messages up on Twitter just before we leave. Muduka says, Shebi Buhari cannot call youth entitled for wanting their PVC. 2019, here we come. He says, while Dozier Pound says, since the government of the day cannot provide jobs, let's make the environment conducive for the people who create jobs to survive and grow, thereby creating jobs. We are done. Find our analysts online at Ugo Dre of Nairametrics, at Sisioge Lagos is Mr. Ireti, Bakare Yusuf, and at Funmi Odude is Funmi Odude. Coming up next, it is time for entertainment, just inside of the grapevine. Keep listening.
The headlines.
So you're pretty sure Buhari's going to walk his back.
He has to because it was not. He almost certainly did not intend to imply what he implied. Yes, it is just it's not being able to speak. But he's not the only person. I mean, we do it all the time here in Nigeria. It is an ageist society castigate youth for no reason. Just be like, the youth of today, they're lazy. They don't want this, and we do it all. It's not just Buhari. It is what the entire nation says.
I said this morning too.
Yes, there you go. You see, what you on TV now?
I must say, I mean, the amount of.
But I'll say it better.
I agree with you.
They lack direction. Not.
What am I supposed to do? They've got bloody Google. Use it.
That's the thing. I understand this. No. That you see, that I don't agree with. The average youth is entitled.
They are entitled.
We like things that are fast. We like things
that
are quick.
Yes, they're just entitled.
They are entitled.
Because as much as that generation had free education or whatever, people used to go to offices to look for work.
And then to apply. How many people apply for
scholarships? No, they don't.
No, they don't.
Give them a job, Seth. They will tell you.
Let me give you an example.
Nobody will apply.
Let me give you a very simple example of the difference of
going
the
to
youth
work.
of
Yes,
today,
those
what
are the
they
ones that
get
have
and
work.
what we
How about
got.
the ones that don't have
In
work
the old
and are still
days,
waiting for their
when you
uncles
had
in
to just
the
even
city.
write a CV, write your CV.
Yeah.
There was no Google to
check.
do
Do
your
research.
research.
Compare and
You had
contrast.
to read a book.
So-
these people have technology,
So-
and they are still
many
waiting
of
for
them
somebody
have
to
to?
hand them.
and that's the thing.
They
In that
think-
light,
sorry,
I
for-
understand what the
they
president
think the
means.
world
Yes.
owes them a living. This is my problem with the youths of Nigeria. They think
But it's
they
not just
think my
Nigeria.
Not just Nigeria,
generation. No, they think my generation owes them a living. Allow me to say something. In any other, well, in the countries that I am used to, you often find that a youth will go out and get a job in I don't know, retail store, Starbucks, whatever, even if they're a degree, right, and start doing things to get themselves better. The average youth in Nigeria is resentful. Is actually resentful of the fact that it has not been provided. Now, his father wrote